That was the worst 7 months of my entire life in the short term, but the best 7 months of my life in the long term. Incredibly transformative, incredibly enlightening. I guarantee, I would not be speaking with you today if I didn't go through that experience, because I probably wouldn't have started my podcast. I probably wouldn't have had the type of vision behind that type of work. I mean, it's crazy to think of and it's crazy to say, and people are like, you're crazy for saying it. But I mean, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life.
Hey there, I'm Sagar Soni. If you are a chronic overthinker, a wannabe productivity expert, and is having a hard time understanding how to squeeze productivity out of every waking minute, but also learn how to take a chill pill, then you are in the right place. Let's learn from successful people, YouTubers, book authors, podcasters, and every other stranger that I can get my hands on. Well, figuratively, let's learn how they balance their life. Welcome to Beyond the Speech. Hey, Tim Doyle, welcome on this podcast. Thank you for taking the time to join me on my podcast. You're the host of your podcast, Outwork. Can you start where the name came from? It's an interesting story. I see where you landed on the name with. I've listened to many of your podcasts, so let's start there.
Yeah, I had a lot of ideas for my podcast name, but the one that I kept coming back to was the Outworker, and this word outwork. I'm a big fitness junkie, love lifting weights, and my mindset when it came to working out was, okay, I'm always trying to outwork what I did the previous session, and thought it was so fascinating. I was like, oh, it's interesting. Working out is kind of like, my goal with it is just a flip-flop of the word. I'm working out to outwork. And it's kind of just become a philosophy of mine where I'm solely just focused on improving upon what I did the previous day. And also from the standpoint of, if you literally look up outwork in the dictionary, it'll say working harder, longer, or faster than somebody else. And my mindset when it comes to outworking is, it's a completely internal solo journey where you are trying to outwork yourself. Because I think in the common understanding of outworking, it's almost becomes a comparison game where you have to be focusing on other people's actions to feel like if you're truly outworking or not. And from my experience, I'm like, that's completely false. This is a completely singular internal journey. And that's what I try to preach on my podcast and on my social media as well, is that you need to find what works for you. You need to find the work that feels most passionate to you and find the work that gives you energy, and then improve upon that every single day.
I see. So in terms of outworking versus overworking, how has it impacted your productivity strategies? What has changed after you realized the difference between the two?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I feel like earlier in my life, and I think this is just how a lot of people are wired, especially with social media, you get into this grind mode, or you have to go all out in order to make progress. And I feel like when I was younger, my mindset, whether it was consciously some points or also just unconsciously, I was like, overwork, like just go all out every single day. And what I've learned about work in general is that it's not a race, but it's more so a dance where you need to have structure to your work, but it needs to be fluid, and you can't just be pushing on the gas pedal 100% every single day, because you are just going to tire yourself out and you're going to drain yourself. So it's more so of just having this mindset of, I have my daily inputs that I need to get done every single day, and sort of just allowing the rest to take care of itself. I'm a big believer that the only thing that we can really control is the work that we do and the inputs, rather than focusing on the results and the outputs. And I think that I had gotten into the mindset of okay, if I overwork, if I go really, really hard, then it'll allow for me to get where I want to go faster. But in actuality, what was happening was I would make careless mistakes, or it just wasn't a healthy mindset when it came to working. So it was almost like I thought I was making faster progress, but I was actually regressing in some regards and had to counteract those mistakes.
I see. Okay. That takes me to the idea of the systems versus goals thing, the importance of the difference. I first read it in Atomic Habits, but then I listened to your episode in your 26 lessons in 26 years of life. You talk about this being a game changer for you. Can you talk about that? Like in mindset wise, yes, we have to constantly remind ourselves. But in your day to day activity, let's say you in the world of fitness or in the world of podcasting now, what does that really look like, systems versus goals?
Yeah, and great point about the Atomic Habits. The funny thing about that actually is that I had the thought about that before I read Atomic Habits, and obviously people would think, "Oh, you just got that from Atomic Habits." But I will just say I had that thought beforehand. But yeah, great question. Because similar to the outwork versus overwork, I think it's a very similar thing. I think when I was younger, I was very goals oriented and goals based, whereas now I'm very systems based. And really, if you told me like what my goal is with podcasting or fitness, I would say I really don't have a goal. I just have a system that I follow every single day. So getting into the specifics of that, let's say for fitness, I have a set workout plan and a set meal plan that I follow every single day. Like, yes, like let's say somebody's goal is to build muscle. Like, obviously, that is a goal that they want to achieve. But if we break that down into a system, it's like, all right, what's the system that goes into the goal? Where it's like, all right, I am going to do these specific exercises. I'm going to try to hit these weights. These are the meals that I'm going to be eating every single day. I'm going to be trying to get this amount of sleep each day. I'm going to go for a daily walk. So it's breaking down that goal into the daily inputs. So you're really not even focused on achieving that goal. You're just focused on the system of doing those things. When it comes to podcasting, yes, my goal is continue to grow my podcast, continue to get on great guests, continue to have it be potentially a source of income in the future. Those are all great goals that I'm striving towards. Is that what I'm focused on every single day, though? No, absolutely not. The system behind the podcast and the daily inputs that go into it is, all right, I'm going to be reaching out to these many people on a weekly basis to get them on. I'm going to be doing the research. I'm going to be doing the editing. I'm going to be cutting it up and putting clips on social media. So I'm taking that goal out of my mindset and I'm just breaking it down into these much easier daily tasks that when you do it every single day, it's very small incremental goals that you're achieving on a daily basis.
I see. I feel like there is room for both because let's say I want to run a half marathon in 4 months. That's a goal. But until I do that, I won't be able to dissect it what my per month looks like, per week, and per day looks like. And yes, you need to identify yourself with systems because after completing the race, then I would be in that state that, okay, what am I going to do right now? So that's why systems are important. But goals actually gives you a reaching point, and now you use your systems on a daily basis, and that's how you reach that goal. So I feel like there is room for both.
Yep, completely agree with you. And like I would say is I think the important things about goals is like I use 75 hard as an example. That's I don't know if you know of that or not, but it's a fitness challenge that people do where 75 days straight of these daily tasks that you have to do. And my big question that I always say to people, and this gets into the systems and the goals, is like, yeah, 75 hard, great goal to achieve. What does day 76 look like? Are you still able to follow that system? Do you still have a system in place? Do you still want to follow that system that you were doing for the 75 hard? So yes, completely agree. I think it's having the goal and then breaking that down into a system. But the big question that you also have to ask yourself is, once you reach that goal, do you want to continue doing that system, or were you really just focused on that goal?
Right. Just now what? On day 76, now what?
Exactly.
I see. Can you share a moment in your life of that sparked this level of shift in your self development journey?
Between systems and goals.
Between overall you reaching this level that I want to develop myself, I need to know how my day to day would look like in terms of whatever goal I want to achieve, podcasting, fitnessing, or any other goals you might have.
Yeah, I mean, I really think for me, it started in the gym with working out and fitness and building my body. I used to play a lot of sports. That's why I got into working out, was from a performance base, so I could perform better on the field.
Hmm. I see. Can
The,
you walk us? No, sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
yeah, I was going to say, then I stopped playing sports, but really enjoyed working out. And that's where that daily routine came into play of, working out, all the inputs that went into that so I could continue to progress. And like I said, when I was a teenager, I was very goals focused. And then I got more mature. And because I think when you're really goals focused, your thought is always like, all right, I'm doing this because I'm trying to get somewhere else. And I think when you enjoy a system that you have in place, yes, okay, I'm doing this and it's going to lead to somewhere else. But you also have this mindset of like focusing on the 24 hours that you have within the day to focus on those daily inputs. And so, yeah, I mean, that mindset got built pretty early on in my life with working out, and it stemmed to all other areas of my life,
Hmm.
with podcasting and things like that.
I see. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Can you walk us through what happened with regarding the story regarding your back injury and how did it impact your life and how did you heal? Because I feel like it's not just a physical healing that you went through; it was more emotional and mental as well.
Yeah, great question, and could probably talk for 2 hours just on this one topic. Yeah, so in September of 2020, I developed really bad pain in my lower back and then also down my entire left leg. And at first didn't think much of it, but then it just got worse and worse. Couldn't bend over, would be incredibly painful to cough or sneeze, was barely able to walk. Um, so just 24/7 chronic pain. Got an MRI and I got diagnosed with two badly herniated discs
Mm.
in my lumbar spine at L4, L5, and L5S1, which are two of the most commonly herniated discs that you can herniate in your back. And went through a lot of physical treatments like cortisone shots, steroid pack, massage therapy, chiropractic adjustments, spinal decompression, acupuncture. I mean, we just threw everything at this thing and none of it was helping me. And for like 7 months, I was just in 24/7 debilitating pain. Wasn't able to work out or do anything that I loved. Pretty much just became a zombie and got introduced to a very interesting type of therapy and became much more educated on this thing called the mind body connection and how physical pain it's not necessarily a problem, but it's more of a manifestation of something going on in your mind. Whereas the pain really isn't a problem from the physical diagnosis I was given with the herniations, but it was more so my mind was keeping me in pain.
Mm.
And to go into this a little bit deeper, my pain got much, much worse after I got that physical diagnosis and saw the MRI and my doctor telling me, hey, you've done serious damage to your body there. So my
Mhm.
mind had gotten into this wiring of, hey, your body's damaged. Hey, you're fragile. Hey, you can't be moving like you used to. Hey, like this is a very serious injury. You've done serious damage here. So when your mind just keeps telling you those things on a daily basis, and when you continue to feel pain, it just reaffirms those ideas, and you get deeper into this hole of thinking, wow, I'm never going to get out of pain. And every single time you feel pain, you have this deep fear. And I would visualize like my discs pushing onto my spine. But when I understood about the mind body connection and understanding like, hey, from a lot of herniations and a lot of chronic pain in general, the physical diagnosis you're given really isn't a problem. Like if you took an MRI, and I'm just making up these numbers, these aren't actual stats, but if you took 100 people, there would most likely be more people than not, if you had an MRI, that would show some type of disc bulge or herniation. When you're 20 years old, your spine starts to shift in different ways, and it's very common and it's very normal. Yes, at the start, you can have some type of physical injury that caused pain. I think that's what happened to me. But what I learned is that to have that type of 24/7 debilitating pain for 7 months, it's not possible. Your nerves kind of go offline, so to speak, after a couple of weeks. So once I started learning about the mind-body connection, getting more so into the mental and emotional side of things, thinking psychologically more so than just physically, understanding that my body was completely healthy and normal and strong rather than weak and fragile. And the big thing that I can't stress enough is that it's breaking that mental wiring. And so, what I tell people is that was the worst 7 months of my entire life in the short term, but the best 7 months of my life in the long term. Incredibly transformative, incredibly enlightening. I guarantee, like, I would not be speaking with you today if I didn't go through that experience, because I probably wouldn't have started my podcast. I probably wouldn't have had the type of vision behind that type of work. And it's crazy to think of, and it's crazy to say, and people are like, you're crazy for saying it. But it's the best thing that's ever happened to me in my entire life. And I know there's a lot of people out there who deal with chronic back pain, and that's something that I'm going to be working on a lot actually in 2025. Is I'm launching a coaching program and helping people heal from chronic pain who have not had any success with any type of physical types of therapies like I had went to, because I know you can be very hopeless. I was very hopeless. Never thought that I would be able to heal. But like I said, it's the best thing that's ever happened to me, and I want to give other people that gift as well.
It's that philosophy, right? That you turn pain into growth, or discomfort is really just growth in disguise. So once we go through such pains, that's when you realize that, not in the moment, definitely not in the moment, but when you look back, you realize that this was the best thing that happened to us. And this mind body connection thing. So I injured myself some similar the way you did. I'm not that bad, but I was on bed rest for about a week. That's how bad it got. And then I hired a coach who was more into functional training, not just heavy lifting. And when he slowly got me back up into lifting, he taught me very specific mind body connections. Just imagining that, let's say you are in a cat cow pose and you want to feel every single vertebrae from your bottom all the way to the neck. Imagine that you're feeling that, and just by going through those motions, you would actually feel that. Or when you would do a squat, you would tell you, okay, focus on this muscle group. Okay, now focus on this muscle group. At one point, I felt like I need to stop listening to music just because I can allow my mind to be free and actually go through these motions, that I need to think about this, think about this. And that's how you get that mind body connection. That's my experience with that philosophy.
Yeah, it's powerful. I feel like I'm deeply in tuned with my mind and body. And when you can get to a point where you feel that deeply connected, and it's a certain type of power that I don't think is easily attainable. But when you are able to get that type of power, it can transform all different areas of your life.
Absolutely. I listened to a lot of your pod episodes. Let's go through a few lines that you said that stuck with me. And you can talk about that. The first one is highest level of accomplishment is not needing to accomplish more. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So I can't take credit for that, or I'll take half credit for that, but I got the idea for that from my episode with John Beatty. John was a mountain climber who climbed the 7 summits, which is the highest peak on all 7 continents. And he got to a point where, so I mean, very accomplished climber. And he got to a point where he kind of stepped away from climbing or didn't do it as serious as he needed to. And he had this deep sense of gratification and power from the standpoint of not feeling that need or that urge to continue to drive to achieve more. And that's something that I have definitely felt within my life as well, pretty recently as well, tying things back into working out and fitness. I mean, I was obsessed with going to the gym, I would say, from the ages of like 17 or 18 until 24. It's like a good 6 to 7 years. Like, it was my main focus. It was like, I'm going to the gym because I want to progress. I want to build my body, which it was also building my mind as well. So, I mean, it was great, but I knew when I was getting older, it was like, man, I wish I wasn't as obsessed with this. And I feel like within the past year, I've finally gotten to that point where I still work out, still love to work out, but it's just from a higher level of consciousness where I'm doing it for the activity, but I'm not trying to achieve or to strive more. So I think when you can get to that mindset of, hey, I'm doing this, but I don't need this, that is a massive accomplishment. And I think you see this with a lot of athletes who it's tough to walk away from your sport. And I think when you do see those athletes every now and then walk away on their own terms before they could maybe win another championship or show, it's a powerful moment because they're like, yeah, I could, but I don't need to.
I see. Yeah. I feel like it's okay to have different seasons as well, because I've been conflicted with this for the last couple of weeks. And the two things that I'm conflicted and battling between is what the next year would look like. And the two things are contentment or going all in. And I don't know which way I need to focus and more energy on, because if you go all in, you will have to sacrifice a lot of things that are not targeted towards that goal, but also having that right balance of contentment. So which way would it be? Because if you try to slow down just because you want to be content with what you have accomplished so far, that's not really going all in, right? So that's why I feel like there are different seasons that you need to know before you get into it.
Well, that's why I think I say it's the highest level of achievement, because for you, I would say you still have that feeling of, oh, I want to achieve more. So you haven't reached those peaks of achieving more. I felt like within working out for me, or whether it's John with climbing the 7 summits, like he felt like, all right, I have achieved the peak of what I want to achieve.
I see.
Could I climb the 7 summits again, and then that would be another great achievement? Yes, I could keep growing. But he's like, I'm going to step away because I've already achieved everything that I've wanted to. So I don't think it's necessarily a mindset of, hey, I want to achieve more, but I'm not going to. I think it's more so a mindset of, I've achieved everything I've wanted to, and I could just stay within that mindset and keep progressing on this path, but I don't need to.
I'll keep that in mind. Because now I think you have answered my question, that am I okay to going towards contentment or going all in? And clearly I don't feel like I've accomplished everything. So then the next year,
go all in.
Yeah, it's going to be going all in.
Because with me, I feel that way towards fitness and working out. It's like, all right, I've achieved everything that I've needed to from that standpoint of continuing to build and progress. But within podcasting, it's the exact opposite. Like, I'm like, no, I'm still on the ground level here. There's still a lot more of achievement. So it's having that mindset within certain areas of your life, but then having a growth mindset and going all in other aspects of your life. And like you said, it's a game of seasons. It's not so much just of a constant, strict mindset that you have for your entire life.
Yeah, absolutely. The second one was the thing is not bad. That thing doesn't matter. Your relationship with that thing does. What was all that about?
Yeah, I think my mindset behind that is really in terms of social media, where people say, oh, social media is bad. It's a terrible tool. It's dangerous. It's making you lazy. And it's like, well, is it social media or is it your relationship with social media? Because my mindset when I was much younger and not using social media as like a creator or a networking tool was just pure consumption. And to this day, it's still a lot of consumption for me, but it's more so my mindset toward it is like, hey, social media is a tool for creating, networking, building something. I mean, the relationship between you and me, you DM'd me on Instagram. Like, we would not be speaking here today if that connection wasn't made through social media. So I don't think you could say social media is bad. It's more so, how's your relationship with it? In terms of food, I think that's another big thing. It's like, is all food bad because McDonald's exists? It's like, no, like maybe you just have a bad relationship with food. So I think we can get into this black and white game of saying that certain things are good or bad, but it's more so, how do I relate to that and how am I building my relationship with that thing?
I see. It's okay. Yeah, that's deep. I'll have to sit back and think about this because I think there's more to learn regarding that phase in my life. So I'll take that back. In the next one was it was in the fitness world. In terms of fitness, workout is not my purpose. It was the bridge to my purpose.
Yeah. I mean, when I was younger, like I said, I was obsessed with working out. My goal was always to get to a point where it was either owning my own gym or just having this mindset of, I want to get to a point where I'm getting paid to work out from some standpoint and have it be my job, whether it's as a trainer or some type of fitness influencer. But I realized as I got older, I really just liked working out from the health and wellness perspective and doing it for myself. But I would not have become the person that I am today with the podcasting and using my voice and having this very strong mindset, I think, without the gym. So I wouldn't be able to do all the stuff today with, if you want to call it motivational content or self-help or personal development. I wouldn't have been able to get to this point if it wasn't for that first step with the fitness. So I thought it was my purpose, but it was really just leading me to my actual purpose with everything that I do now.
I see. You know what? I thought that you would say that your purpose came out of your injury because it's interesting. I've noticed it many times before, and you hear it in other people's stories too, that they get onto a completely new path after going through some sort of trauma. And that's where their new baseline is. And now they try to pivot from wherever they were to the next step. That's why I thought it would be from your injury, not just your love for fitness since you were a kid.
You're 100% correct. I mean, that was a life-changing experience, and that is what has led me to my purpose. It's just that I think of it still as with working out is because I thought working out was my purpose rather than it was really just a bridge for me to get to what I really was supposed to do in my life. But you are absolutely correct, is that entire injury just broke me down, but then built me back up into, I feel like, the realest, most authentic version of myself today.
That's amazing. What is after getting into this new world of fitness after your injury and understanding about the mind body connection, especially and with the added podcasting world that you are in now? What does your daily routine look like right now, and how has it evolved in the last couple of years after the injury and after your first episode? Habits, non-negotiables, personal mantras. What does your daily routine look like?
Yeah. So I would say before my injury, I wasn't doing any podcasting. So it was just focused on my job and working out. And then once I started podcasting, my daily routine stayed pretty similar with working out, but I started to learn, or I started having the urge of like, all right, I want to be taking more of my time from working out and putting it into podcasting. In terms of non-negotiables, though, still have to be working out on a regular basis, still have to be following my nutrition. I'm very disciplined with the way that I eat and, making sure that I'm eating enough protein and getting good carbon fat sources in on a daily basis and drinking enough water. Because I think what anyone has to realize is that whatever it is you're doing, you will become that much better if you have a good health and wellness routine. And I've seen this within podcasting as well, and I'm sure you have too, is that podcasting can be like very physically demanding, I think, at times. I mean, there have been times where I've had conversations where I would be like drenched in sweat at the end of it, because it would be like a very serious or intense conversation or just doing a lot of research. And you need to be physically fit for those types of things. You need to be mentally fit. So making sure that I have a good health and wellness routine. And the way that I see it is that if I was succeeding with podcasting, but falling out in other areas of my life, that would look more like a failure than a success.
Yeah, you don't hear it right now, but I have a fan going on in my back, just because in the first couple of episodes, I felt that. I was like, okay, I'm either getting nervous or this is a very demanding activity that I'm doing right now. So yes, I understand exactly what you're talking about.
You wouldn't think about it, but yeah.
Yeah. But see, now at first you were just working and your full-time job and working out on the side. And now you added the podcasting world to it. Now that's just a giant umbrella of podcasting, but then that includes finding guests, researching about them, probably reading books about them or watching videos, reaching out to them. If they don't respond, follow up again. Then you get onto the interview, which lasts 1 hour, 2 hours. Then you edit it out and then you post it up. Outside of this, you have to think about the 60-second reels that go on Instagram and any other platform you use. So now there's so many activities going on all at once. Have you ever felt that now I need to do my job, I need to work out every day, I need to do this podcasting world, get into the podcasting world and do the daily things that this world requires, I need to be as productive as possible. Okay, I'm falling behind. Oh shit, I missed out on doing this and this today. That's how you fall into the toxic productivity world. What do you think about this? Because I feel that all the time and I can't get a grip on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that comes back to the whole systems versus goals things and just being organized and knowing on a daily basis, or like what are the daily inputs that I need to take off on each day. But yeah, you're 100% right. It can get overwhelming, and I think on the outside looking in, when you say, "Oh, I've got a podcast," people just don't have the appreciation for how many different minute details go into it. And the actual conversation that you have with somebody is probably like the least amount of time that actually goes into creating everything, with the editing and the marketing behind it, with social media and doing the research and reading the books and doing the outreach. You have to love it. Like, if I told somebody, hey, start a podcast, you'd probably fall off pretty quickly if you didn't actually want to have a podcast. And I think that's, I mean, it's a stat that everyone says now, but I think like no shows get past 10 episodes or whatever it is, because, and you could think like, oh, 10 episodes at nothing, but like 10 episodes is a lot for a podcast. Like,
yes,
it's impressive. I mean, I'm up to 41, and each time that I put up an episode now, I'm like very proud of myself. And that goes back into just like being fulfilled, like with the work and the inputs. Like if you have that type of creative energy and you have that type of passion behind just putting out the content, and like you see that as the result, it becomes very special work for you. And I think that's the only way that somebody could really sustain this type of work.
Yeah, fair enough. I think it just comes down to how much you love it, and then you see that's the giant picture, and now you divide it into daily steps. I think that's the way to look at it.
There have been many times, because I mean, I put it out there publicly when I started. I'm like, there's going to be an episode every single week, and putting that out there publicly, I was like, all right, I want to be held accountable for this. And there'd be times where I would get a guest last minute, or all right, I'm filming a solo episode this week. And it almost becomes like a game and a challenge in a way. And I think that's how you have to see it. You have to see it as like, all right, this is a game that I enjoy playing rather than work or a goal that I'm trying to achieve.
Yeah. I'm still only 10, 11 episodes. This is probably the 13th one. So I'm learning to get there, because as you said, the talking part with your guest is probably hour, 2 hours. But just to get here, I have listened to probably 15 of your episodes, and I'm trying to listen to your solo. So I get to learn about you, but then I'm listening to your guest episodes. So I know what kind of feedback you get from the responses and how you react to those responses. So there's so much work that goes in creating anything online. So I know when you say that, when someone says, I'm going to start a podcast, or when you tell someone, they don't appreciate it because they don't see the work that goes behind it. But if even in this world, is there a productivity or self-development notion currently that you see on social media a lot, but you would like to debunk that this just does not work? People only do it because it gets you more likes and more views, but it doesn't work in the real world. It's just too much to deal with. Have you felt that before, or do you see any specific notion that is just for Instagram and not for real life?
Well, speaking of Notion, I mean, I've never used it before, but I feel like whatever Notion is, I feel like that's a big thing. I think just like, I don't have like a calendar or like different types of things printed out, or like different types of items to help me with productivity or whatever. It's kind of just like when I wake up in the morning, I know what I need to get done in a way. And I don't know if that makes me different in a way. I know a few people who are just like, I just work off of intuition and I know what my daily and weekly work looks like. My mindset when it comes to work is just in order of like, all right, when's this need to be finalized by? Like if I need to do research for a guest that is in a week, but I have to edit and cut up an episode that's going to be up like 2 or 3 days before, I'm like, all right, I'm putting all my time into finishing that episode that needs to be up. So I think people try to make productivity into something more than it actually is, and feel like, oh, I need to have some type of very methodical, thought out system with all these different types of plans and everything. And I'm like, no, like less is more. Keep it simple, because that's when you'll actually follow the system that you have in place.
Yeah, I think people overcomplicate it way too much. It comes down to probably 1, 2, or 3 things that let's call them non-negotiables, and just focus on that until the day is over. Whatever doesn't get done, roll over to the next day.
Exactly. Because when you do that type of productivity planning work, you feel like you're actually getting work done, but it's like, no, you're just wasting time.
Yeah. From your experiences, let's talk about one of this one. What can you talk about the retreat that you went to recently and what you learned out of that?
And what I'll say is just like getting into the research. You've done incredible research here, and it will set you apart, because there are a lot of podcasts that I'll listen to where people will just ask very vague, generic questions about like, what's the hardest thing you've gone through? And it just creates a very boring conversation. But, you know, my goal, and I know it's your goal as well, just by the types of questions that you ask, you know, very pointed, specific questions about somebody's life will make it a much better conversation between the guest and the interviewer, but also just listeners in general. So yeah, I mean, that was a life-changing experience as well. Went to a men's retreat in Austin, Texas, towards the end of October with Danny Miranda. Speaking of another podcaster, Danny Miranda is a big podcaster. He just brought it back. He hadn't been doing it for a little while, so he could focus on his coaching business and his retreats. But he was the one who was leading the retreat. It was a lot of meditation, journaling, but most importantly, just like connecting with other like-minded people. I mean, I feel like within my own environment, I've always struggled finding like-minded people when it comes to personal development and going all in on different passions and creative journeys. So it was great to be able to connect with, literally it felt like 10 other people that were just like me, and create very strong bonds. And Austin, Texas is also an incredible city, and getting deeper into, how impactful it was for me, and what I've learned, why I created a podcast. We did this exercise that Danny ran called, finding out what your reason for being is. And one of the main questions during the exercise that he asked, he's like, what's something that you feel like you didn't have as a child or like got neglected? And like, we had to write this out. And I, wrote out, I was like, I feel like I needed a voice. I feel like I didn't talk enough, or I feel like I was too quiet, or feel like I would be in loud environments and felt like I wouldn't want to be in that loud environment. So I'll just stay quiet. And what he tells us after the entire experience is like, what you wrote down, what you felt like was a void in your childhood, is your reason for being, and what you try to do in your adult life and what you try to give to other people. And I'm like, that's why I started a podcast. What is podcasting all about? Podcasting is about using your voice and allowing other people to use their voice. So having that type of high level consciousness and awareness of why I created a podcast now is a really cool feeling, and just adds to that extra layer of why the work is so enjoyable. So that entire retreat was very impactful, and couldn't recommend to anyone enough to either with Danny Miranda do a retreat or just retreats in general.
I see. Okay. I'm trying to think that what you have gone through so many self-development phases. It could be in fitness world, then getting out of the injury, and now you are slowly getting into the world of how do you be more aware of your why you are here, the question why you're here. In the last couple of months, probably a year, I feel like the only answer to that is slowing down. And I know it sounds weird, because if you slow down, somebody else is going to overtake you in whatever path you are on. But I feel like slowing down and really identifying what your priorities are, that will set you apart in the long run. So being aware of that consciously is so tough, because you would get angry at yourself for not finishing your daily to-dos. You will feel angry at yourself for missing that workout. But then you have to understand that, okay, I'm going to slow down. I'm going to see why I'm feeling this way. What happened that I fell off the track on my to-do list today? So I feel like the answer is only slowing down, and just that's how you get to see the full picture.
Couldn't agree with you more. And I think that's a big theme that you're going to see play out next year within the self-development, personal development space, whether it's within social media or anything, is exactly what you said, where I feel like in years past, it's been focused on motivation, discipline, keep moving forward. And I think we're slowly starting to see more so, like what you're saying is slow down, be where your feet are, be present, be compassionate with yourself. Because from my experience, what I've learned was, all right, I thought I had to be all those things, motivated, disciplined, keep moving forward to get to where I want to go. But I've realized it's actually that second bucket of things that has really helped me progress the most. And combining those things, though, you need to work hard. You need to be disciplined, but you also need to be compassionate with yourself and be level-headed and have your feet on the ground.
Absolutely. Do you, from your experiences, if somebody is stuck in whatever world they are in right now, mentally, if they are stuck, is there something that you would recommend for someone to get into this world, that how do I improve myself? Doesn't matter what it is, whatever niche they want to focus on. If they want to improve themselves, do you have specific advice for them to get into it so that they can see some sort of progress and that will allow them to jump forward?
Go for a walk, physical movement.
Yeah.
That is the biggest thing I think, because it's something that you can literally go do right away. It's like, go for a walk. Physical movement and stimulating your mind that way has been so crucial for me, and I don't think enough people do it. And there's been research done that going for walks and stimulating your mind in that low energy type of way, it can de-age your mind, and it helps with depression and can stimulate thoughts. I mean, I go for a lot of daily walks, and a big thing for me is I will literally talk with myself out loud, whether it's different ideas, different things that are stressing me out, different things that I need to be doing with work. And I think just talking out those ideas and actually like physically releasing it from your body and using your voice can allow for, like you were saying, kind of slow down and be present. I think that's a massive thing. But also just doing like little tasks. I think having some type of workout routine that you do, or not necessarily workout, but I think just some type of activity that you do on a regular basis and early in the day where you can check the box and kind of have that mindset of like, all right, that was a win. Like, I just went for my daily walk in the morning, and it just kind of creates this snowball effect, and you work your way up from there with other different things. Because I feel like if you can do that small stuff, you can continue to progress and then do things that are a little bit bigger than that, and then a little bit bigger than that, and then a little bit bigger.
I see. Yeah, I call that the eat that frog method, where you do the hardest thing you want first thing in the morning, and then it's all great after that because you've already achieved what's the hardest thing for you. So that's one thing that I constantly go back to. But I feel like if somebody, I've noticed this myself too, that if I'm in a rut and if I'm stuck, the one thing that I try to tell people is what you said about doing the small things, because the idea of I'm not motivated enough and which is why I'm not disciplined enough, I think that's a myth, because you have to take the first one or two steps that will give you the motivation to take the further steps, and that's when the loop starts, and that's when you see results. Now that result will give you the motivation to go on and do the second step. So I feel like doing the tiny things on a daily basis, that's what I from my experience, I feel like that's something that anybody should do if they want to get out of a rut.
And I think it's such minute stuff and things that you wouldn't even think of, like take pride in the way that you make your bed, like take pride in the way that you brush your teeth, the way that you empty your dishwasher, like little things like that get you into the mindset of being able to do any type of work.
That I can do this.
Yeah, exactly.
I get it. Outside of fitness, how do you measure success for yourself and your podcast?
In terms of podcasting, it's all about the inputs for me at this point in the juncture. I mean, I haven't even been doing this a year yet. So, like I said, I held myself accountable to wanting to put out an episode every single week. So that's what I've been measuring success in. I think especially early on in things, I think if you try to measure yourself on some type of external result, it will only potentially lead you to feeling like, oh, I haven't lived up to what I'm trying to achieve. But anything worth having, it takes time. Like when I was in the gym, like it took me a few years before I actually felt like, oh, like I've started to make a little progress here. And that's why you have to love the work. So, my success when it comes to podcasting is solely focused on, am I putting out an episode every single week? Am I doing the inputs? And also just like, is this in a conversation that I enjoyed having? Like, is this a conversation that if somebody listened to, they'd be like, wow, that was a great conversation. And it's like, if I'm following my intuition on the guests that I have on who I think are interesting, who have also created, an interesting conversation together, then I'm like, yeah, that's a success.
I see. I feel like you going through these podcast guests and your own journey where you other people that have inspired you and gotten you here. Do you have specific books, mentors that have the most profound impact on your growth? Can you name a few?
My favorite book is Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, who is
Awesome.
the creator of Nike, and read that probably 3 or 4 years ago. And the reason why it's my favorite book, and what I say to everyone, is that, Nike is seen as this powerhouse, worldwide empire brand, billions of dollars. And it was started with this one, 20-something-year-old kid who was just like, I want to sell sneakers. And everything that is big in the world started small and started at the beginning. So I think we can get into this mindset of seeing mentors or seeing big companies and thinking like, oh, they're so much better than me. And it's like, no, like they're just farther along in the process. And I think it's a big thing. Like, don't put people on pedestals. Everyone that I have on my podcast or who I'd want to have on my podcast, I'm like, they're just a human, just like you and me. In terms of mentors, a big one for me, like just athlete speaking, like I'm a Boston sports fan. So Tom Brady was massive for me, especially from the standpoint of 6th-round draft pick. Like the guy had a resume thinking he wasn't going to play football and, thought he was going to work in finance or something. So, he's definitely, I wouldn't necessarily call him a mentor because he doesn't know me, but he's definitely somebody that I look up to. And I think sports plays a massive role within somebody's psyche, I think, if they're a sports fan growing up. Whereas like, I grew up being a Boston sports fan and saw all of my favorite teams win. And I think that just got me into the mentality of like, hey, the expectation is to win here. And I think that's carried over within my own life where it's like, hey, when you set out to do something, like the expectation is like, you're going to work hard here. And this is, something special that you're going to do. Other books, like you mentioned, Atomic Habits is a great one. Yeah, I feel like I'm at a point in my life. I'll say one other one, Chris Williamson within the podcast space. I think he does incredible work. But I honestly think like I'm at the point in my life now where I try to look more inward than outward for motivation and mentorship, because I think you get to a point where if you're looking to others for mentorship or inspiration or motivation, you kind of just become a watered down version of that other person. Whereas like you need to get to a point where you're following your own internal compass because you're the person that you're trying to build up. You're not just trying to be the next Chris Williamson or the next Tom Brady.
That's excellent advice. Because the reason I started this podcast, in my mind, I had this limiting belief that anybody who gets onto the podcasting world has done something previously, which has set them apart. So, for example, I always listen to Impact Theory, but Tom Bilyeu, he has created Quest Nutrition, which is $1 billion company. Then Joe Rogan and there is another one for Think Media. It's a YouTube podcast, but he had a channel for 10 years before getting into this world. But then Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom, is the only podcast that I feel like if a guy who was on Love Island for 1 or 2 seasons was a party planner for a couple of years and then goes and becomes one of the biggest podcasts in the world right now, if he can do that, then I should be able to do that too. So I agree with that idea that sure, have mentors, but look deep within yourself, because you don't want to be just a revision two of your mentor. I really like that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it gets into the mindset within podcasting. It's like, yeah, you can look at Chris Williamson for inspiration, but like when you're doing the work, don't be of the mindset of like, oh, well, what questions would Chris Williamson ask this person? It's like, no, like be in tune with who you are as a person, because that's going to be the most natural and authentic, and you'll create your own type of style and you'll see what works. And who knows, like maybe one day then it's like, oh, Sagar does his podcast this type of way, so this is how I'm going to do it as well. So it's like, I think when you're in the beginning of your journey, it's like you need that type of person who's ahead of you to look for some type of mentorship or guidance for creating the structure and the foundation around it. But then I think you need to get to a point where it's like, all right, like I need to follow my own intuition with how I think this is best.
I agree. One last question before we wrap this up. I know it's almost an hour here. If you could go back and give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would that be?
Just one.
Just one.
I'd probably say, and I'm a less is more type of guy, where I'm not going to give long pieces of advice. All I'll say is that you're on the right path.
That's golden. Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much for for joining me on this podcast, Tim. If people want to find you, where can what do they search? I'll leave all of your handles in the show notes below.
Appreciate it, Sagar. Great conversation. Yeah, if anyone wants to connect with me, best place would probably be on Instagram at tim.doyle. Doyle is Doyle, but instead of an L, it's a 1. If you want to listen to my podcast, it's on all streaming platforms, YouTube, The Outworker. And yeah, would love to connect with anyone and see if I can help anyone in any way.
Thanks a lot, Tim. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sagar.